Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by
SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
Chemistry That Matters, SABIC. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Driven by Kia Sonet, wild by design.
Two days back, we brought you an interview with Dr. Li Mengyan, a virologist from China who said the Wuhan virus was made in a laboratory. Many scientists have dismissed her scientific paper as baseless. Now, a biomedical expert, the president of the World Academy of Biomedical Sciences, who is linked to the United Nations, has made the same claim. He says the virus was made in a Chinese military lab. Though his hypothesis is not the same as that of Dr. Yan, his conclusion is, he calls it chimera, an organism created in a lab. He says the WHO failed to uphold the mandate of the United Nations and that finding a vaccine will not be easy. Was this a leak or a case of bioterrorism? Professor Giuseppe Trito points to the poor safety record of the Chinese laboratory in Wuhan. His assertions are explosive and worrying at the same time. Tonight, we bring you an exclusive interview from Rome, and we also focus on the race for bioweapons. Which countries have such P4 labs? What regulations do they follow? How often is there a leak of this kind? I can tell you that the answers will shock you. Also on the show tonight, Pakistan wants to hold elections in occupied Gilgit-Baltistan. Imran Khan wants to convert it into a fifth province of his country. But why is the army meeting opposition parties on this? Is the anti-Imran alliance already coming apart? Saudi Arabia and Bangladesh are caught in a dispute. Migrant workers and Rohingya refugees are at the center of this. Riyadh does not want them. We bring you a ground report from Dhaka. A major setback to Joe Biden. His son is accused of links to prostitution rings and the Chinese military, the explosive findings of a Senate intelligence report. And Kandahar has an all-women's gym with women in burqas exercising their right to freedom. We'll bring you that story, but first, as always, Gravitas Global Headlines.
Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has slammed Pakistan at the SAARC foreign ministers' meet. The minister said India has a commitment to the neighborhood first policy, but cross-border terrorism remains a major challenge for the region. Sri Lanka has said it will take appropriate measures if Chinese mobile applications pose any threat to its national security. The Telecommunications Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka said that it has started monitoring global developments regarding Chinese mobile applications. Authorities said that even though Sri Lanka does not have the means to monitor every single mobile application, it is following the global best practices in this regard. A South Korean official has been shot dead and burned by North Korean troops, according to the South's defense ministry, which called it a brutal act. Seoul alleges that North Korean soldiers shot him, then poured oil over his body and set him on fire. Even as several nations, including blocs like European Union, deny recognition to Belarusian strongman Alexander Lukashenko as president, China says that it supports Lukashenko. Chinese Foreign Ministry says the presidential polls are the internal affairs of Belarus and it respects the choice made by Belarusian people. Australian authorities have rescued 88 pilot whales and are trying to free 20 others that survived Australia's worst mass stranding. Meanwhile, the crews are preparing to remove hundreds of decomposing carcasses from the Tasmanian coast. At least 28 people were killed after a gas tanker exploded in the central Nigerian state of Kogi. The accident took place opposite a petrol station along the Lokoja-Zariagi highway in the state. The state governor said in a statement many vehicles, properties and other valuables were destroyed. Protesters took to the street across the United States, protesting against the grand jury ruling in the fatal police shooting of Breonna Taylor.
Based on the evidence, there's nothing conclusive to say that Detective Hankinson's of his bullets hit Miss Taylor.
A grand jury decided that none of the 3 white officers involved in March's deadly police raid on Taylor's apartment would be charged for causing her death, though one officer was indicted on charges of endangering her neighbors. The indictment came more than 6 months after Taylor, a black emergency medical technician and aspiring nurse, was killed after the 3 officers forced their way into her home with a search warrant in a drug trafficking investigation. Crews have been racing against time to save homes in the famed Mount Wilson Observatory from California's biggest, most dangerous wildfire. The Bobcat Fire broke out in the Angeles National Forest north of Los Angeles. Its rapid spread has prompted the law enforcement officials to call for new evacuations. Former Australian cricketer Dean Jones has passed away at the age of 59. He suffered a cardiac arrest earlier today in Mumbai, where he was working as part of the broadcasting team for the Indian Premier League. Jones had a stellar 10-year career for Australia and was part of Alan Border's team, which won the 1987 World Cup in India. Jones was one of the original one-day superstars who revolutionized the 50-over format in the late 80s. Swedish footballing legend Zlatan Ibrahimovic has become the latest big-name footballer to test positive for COVID-19. The AC Milan striker started the Serie A season with 2 goals against Bologna earlier this week and underwent a test along with the rest of the Milan squad after defender Leo Duarte tested positive on Wednesday. The club have informed health authorities that the 38-year-old will undergo mandatory quarantine at home. He is likely to be sidelined for the next 2 weeks.
It began 9 months ago. The killer Wuhan virus is showing no signs of abating. Every day we report about more infections, more cases, more deaths. But the question about the origin of the Wuhan virus remains unanswered. Now, more and more scientists are coming up with the claim that the virus was made in a laboratory. We cannot independently verify their claims, but we can speak to them and try to understand their hypothesis. Tonight, we bring you one such interview, a global biomedical expert who says the virus was made in a lab as part of a program run by the Chinese military. Listen to this carefully. He says the lab initially collaborated with France and the US in the name of developing a SARS vaccine. But soon these foreign scientists were sidelined, the collaboration turned into a competition, and vaccine research became a bioweapons program. These are major claims. And this is a world-renowned scientist we are talking about who cannot be dismissed. Before we bring you the interview, here are some pointers, that the things that we are sure about, that this pandemic began in China. We know that. Wuhan is the original epicenter. China tried to hide the initial outbreak, but it failed. And all of these things are a matter of record. What is still unclear is the origin. Did it start in a wet market in Wuhan where bats were sold? Or did it leak unintentionally from a laboratory in Wuhan? Or worse, did China unleash this virus as a bioweapon? For many experts, the lab theory is a non-starter. They don't agree. They say it's a conspiracy theory. But it refuses to die. Earlier this week, we spoke to Chinese virologist Dr. Li Mengyan. She fled from Hong Kong, allegedly after she tried to speak out about the Chinese cover-up. Dr. Yan says the Wuhan virus was made in a lab and the WHO is party to Beijing's cover-up. She has published a paper and called it proof. But her claims have been widely rejected by the scientific community. So who should we trust? What was really going on inside the Wuhan lab? Should you even consider the idea of a leak, or should the world just dismiss it? Professor Giuseppe Trito says you should not ignore it. Professor Trito is an internationally known expert in biotechnology. He is the president of the World Academy of Biomedical Sciences and Technologies, an institute affiliated to UNESCO. He has written a book called China COVID-19, the Chimera that Changed the World. It says there was a high chance of a leak from the Wuhan lab. Earlier today, we spoke to Professor Trito. He says China has the capability to modify viruses and develop bioweapons. He says the Wuhan Institute of Virology did not follow the global standards for safety for a long time. And Chinese scientists were specifically working on bat coronaviruses, a project that was supervised by the military's top scientist, Shi Zhengli. Professor Trito raises serious questions about the Wuhan lab. It is called Asia's largest virus bank. Scientists classify it as a P4 facility. A P4 lab is a lab that is supposed to follow the highest level of biosafety precautions. Almost all major countries in the world have a lab like this, and that includes India. They follow global standards for safety. And these labs are open to inspection by the world, but not the Wuhan lab. China does not believe in global rules. This facility has a checkered safety record. Professor Trito told us that the Wuhan laboratory only notified its safety measures last year. That was in 2019. It's been around since 2014. This lab was conducting studies on bat coronaviruses, and interestingly, it is headed by China's leading expert on bioweapons, the PLA's Major General Chen Wei. What Professor Trito told us today is what the world has long feared. He spoke to us from Rome earlier today. Here's the Gravitas exclusive interview. Professor Trito, welcome to Beyond.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
You've said some very interesting things. You've called this a chimera, an organism that is created in a lab. You say that coronavirus was engineered in a Chinese laboratory. Why do you say that, sir?
This is a long story because starting from the SARS-CoV-1 epidemic in China between 2002 and 2004. And from this time, there was the interest of virologists in China, but also in the world, to study coronavirus in bats. This is what the first things. So it was a campaign in the world, but especially in China, to search all the coronavirus who were in this natural reservoir that represented by bats, especially some sort of bats as Rhinophilus or Souch bat. And Professor Shi Zhengli was involved from the beginning on that because she was a great specialist in biology on bats. And she was supported by some international organization who work on the ecological aspect as Eco Alliance to begin to study this coronavirus, this SARS virus, SARS-like virus in bats. So people collected in many places in China from different virologists, different strains of this virus. And they begin to study their pathogenicity and virulence in relation to the man, especially to find a vaccine against SARS-1. So it was the first relationship between China and France to create really a P4 laboratory, a really laboratory of security, high security level, to permit to store this type of virus, potentially pathogen virus, and also to begin to study together. But progressively, French people were no more involved into the general strategy of China on the study on virus. And the group of Shi Zhengli was exposed to different teams in the world and technology that can be implemented to create recombinant virus in a laboratory.
I'll try to paraphrase what you said simply for our viewers. So the Chinese researchers, led by Dr. Shi Jingli, started to look for a vaccine for SARS. And they sought help from scientists in France and the US. But at some point, that collaboration stopped, and she started doing her own thing and developing lethal bioweapons. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, chimeric recombinant virus in laboratory. So they were not natural when you create in a lab.
So you're saying vaccine research morphed into the development of bioweapons. There are also reports that at some point the Wuhan Institute of Virology was brought under PLA Major General Chen Wei, who is a leading bioweapons expert. Is that a coincidence, or is it because they were onto something?
Dr. Chen Wei, who is a colonel of the military army, but of the medical military army, was a great hero in Africa when he attempted to create a vaccine against Ebola, also with the a nose spray vaccine. So she has a big experience from the military medical part in China of the experience, the exposure to Ebola, Zika, etc., to protect the Chinese people who go to work in Africa too. So was the person that when the leakage happened in Wuhan and the situation was so critical in terms of the epidemic locally, the government asked to her and to military forces in China to close the environment around Wuhan. And she arrived with a team of medical doctors, a famous professor of pneumology, who is the president of the Association of Pneumology in China, and people who work on traditional medicine. So the idea was to circumscribe the area, to avoid the leakage in all China, and to begin to work on vaccine.
You've made some very startling claims. Do you have proof of what you have said? Because other scientists, including a researcher from China, Dr. Li Mengyan, made similar claims, and her report has been rubbished by the scientific community.
Yes, I have seen the report of the Yan report, very briefly. Fundamentally, she arrived at the same conclusion that was a man-made laboratory in relation to the technology, the insert that we use it. She mentioned that there were two backbones were created in a military laboratory in China. That was ZC45, ZXC21, the basic backbone. But this backbone are well known because they were published by the military university in China. Surely they participate to the creation of a lot of SARS-like backbone to create a new virus in the laboratory, but are not directly linked to that.
Would you call this virus a bioweapon or an accident?
It can be a leakage, surely. This is an eventuality that coming from this type of laboratory, especially that was the first experience from the Chinese people and Chinese virology to have a P4 laboratory. If you are not trained, you don't have a very strong international cooperation and supervision, you can have this type of accident. Also in the United States, in the military laboratory, there are accidents each month, but they are controlled, they contained, because they know the way in which they do that. They control all the people who enter and sort out from the laboratory with a specific security protocol. This was not done. The first protocol were published from one laboratory in 2019 on Nature and under the edge of WHO to show that people were trained to work in this laboratory. But imagine the laboratory work before too. Okay, this is the first thing. Second thing is the military side. If country can develop from the research, from the basic research, bioweapon. And we have the International Convention on Bioweapon. The only great country who show addition to this convention but never ratified the convention is China. But the sign that military people arrived in Wuhan to close the environment, to control the environment, to attempt to reestablish a normal situation in the laboratory is in any way a sign that military people knows what happened in the laboratory on Wuhan. But we cannot give the responsibility to them. They create intentionally these type of things. But surely these events show how is weak for the moment the international regulation on the world, how the United Nations don't keep a lot of attention on the activity of WHO. WHO is a simple an agency of the United Nations. On the contrary, in the last year, become some sort of public-private organization who manage a lot of money from private sources, and he lost the core of the mission of the United Nations. No General Assembly of the United Nations give the authority to WHO to become a public-private organization.
Right. And we'll also have to find a way to hold China accountable, but that's a debate for some other day. Professor Trito, thanks very much for joining us, and look forward to reading your book when it's published in English.
Very soon, very soon. Thank you very much to your channel. Thank you.
Let me pick up from where Professor Trito left. We still don't know for sure if the Wuhan virus is a bioweapon. But what we do know is biological warfare is a real threat, and this pandemic should wake up the world to the threat it poses. Militaries the world over, we understand, have bioweapons programs, even though the international rule book clearly bans them. So what are bioweapons? Who has them? And what is the world doing to prevent a bio war? Our next report has the answers.
– 2001 was a horrific year for Americans. It instantly brings back memories of 9/11. But there was also something else that terrorized Americans the same year. It lasted almost a month. Lawmakers and media outlets received letters containing military-grade anthrax, a deadly bacterium that can kill people. This was bioterrorism. 5 people died, 17 more were infected. The world seems to have forgotten about bioweapons. The headlines don't mention it, but the threat still exists. Bioweapons are bacteria, viruses, insects, and fungi weaponized to kill or incapacitate humans. Using a bioweapon is an act of war. In 1972, world leaders set up the Biological Weapons Convention. It bans the development, production, and stockpiling of an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. More than 180 countries are party to this convention, including India, that ratified it in 1997. But the convention has not been able to contain the bioweapons threat. It is believed that at least 6 countries could have an ongoing bioweapons program. They are Iraq, Iran, Libya, China, Russia, and North Korea. The world knows little about these programs, but an American assessment says China has an advanced bioweapons program. It also has an advanced chemical warfare program that includes development, production, and weaponization capabilities. Another report says China is also focusing its attention on gene editing technologies. This is a worrying claim. So far, the world has guarded itself against biological agents that are of natural origin. But with the help of technology, adversaries can hack diseases and make them deadlier. 2 years ago, the US military had raised an alarm. It believes that recreated viruses and toxic bacteria are the new age threats. In 2016, the US intelligence community put gene editing on its list of potential weapons of mass destruction. The world is not ready for these modern bioweapons. Scientific breakthroughs are exposing the gaps in the Biological Weapons Convention. There is no formal verification regime. Compliance is difficult to monitor. Even non-state actors have tried to develop deadly bioweapons. In 2017, experts raised a warning about this at the United Nations Security Council. A fresh global consensus to strengthen the rules against bioweapons is the need of the hour. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Shifting focus to Pakistan, Imran Khan is trying to strike two birds with one stone. After releasing a fantasy map, he wants to declare Gilgit-Baltistan as Pakistan's fifth province. It will give him an edge in the upcoming election. It will also give him control over a crucial region. This area has remained under Pakistan's illegal occupation for 7 decades. It is heading for Legislative Assembly election. The President has issued a notification. The polling date is 15th November. Voting will be held on 24 general seats of the Legislative Assembly. Now, the problem is that Imran Khan's party is not on strong footing here. Gilgit-Baltistan was ruled by the Pakistan Muslim League, that is Nawaz Sharif's party. Their 5-year term has ended. Close to a dozen political parties are contesting the upcoming election, and that includes the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the Prime Minister's party. The region has never really been the PTI stronghold. Shia Muslims are in majority here. They are said to make up at least 40% of this region's population. So Imran Khan came up with an election strategy. You could say it's a desperate attempt to guarantee a win in the polls. And this is why he wants to declare Gilgit-Baltistan as Pakistan's fifth province. A win here will give him a strategic edge over India. It will also ease Chinese access to the region. It will clear the roadblocks for the China-Pakistan economic corridor. It will help Chinese investors in setting up industries. And the Pakistan army also stands to benefit from Chinese money. Lots of gains. So in short, it is important to win here. Now let me show you some headlines. The Pakistan Army Chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, has been holding secret meetings with political parties. Reports say he's trying to convince the opposition. He wants them to agree to declare Gilgit-Baltistan as Pakistan's fifth province. Are these backdoor efforts working? Not really. The move has divided Pakistan's political landscape. Cracks have begun to appear in the newly formed opposition alliance. The People's Party of Pakistan and its chairperson Bilawal Bhutto Zardari agrees with the army. PMLN leader and Nawaz Sharif's daughter Maryam Nawaz does not agree. She has vehemently opposed it. Speaking to reporters in Islamabad, she said the issue should be discussed in Parliament and not at the Pakistan Army headquarters. Take a look.
मैं ये समझती हूँ कि जिस इशू पे वो बुलाया गया था वो गिलगित बल्तिस्तान का इशू था और गिलगित बल्तिस्तान का जो इशू है वो पॉलिटिकल इशू है, वो अवामी रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स का इशू है, उनके सॉल्व करने का इशू है, उनकी मशावरत का इशू है. ये जो फैसले हैं ये पार्लियामेंट में होने चाहिए, ये GHQ में नहीं होने चाहिए.
What about India? How does New Delhi see this development? WION raised this question at a Foreign Ministry press briefing earlier today. I'll leave you with this response.
We have seen the statements by the Pakistani leadership and media reports in this regard. Any action by Pakistan to alter the status of the militarily occupied so-called Gilgit-Baltistan has no legal basis whatsoever and is totally void ab initio.
Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, going after pro-democracy activists, the Chinese regime is squeezing the freewheeling Hong Kong press. The Hong Kong police, a tool of the CCP, has issued new guidelines. that will deprive hundreds of journalists of their right to report. The very definition of a journalist has been altered by the Chinese state. This report has more.
Hong Kong was once home to an outspoken and vibrant media. It ranked far above mainland China in multiple press freedom indices. But the spirit of free speech in this city is set to disappear forever. The Chinese regime has now narrowed the very definition of a journalist. These guidelines were issued by Hong Kong police on Wednesday. They are aimed at amending the definition of a media representative. The Hong Kong police will no longer recognize press accreditations or ID proof issued by local media groups and journalist associations. You will only be called a journalist if your media network is recognized by China's Information Services Department. The rules apply to everyone: online media outlets, newspapers, reporters, photographers, even freelancers. Everybody will have to be registered and recognized by the Chinese state. China's foreign ministry says this move is aimed at strengthening the Hong Kong media in accordance with Chinese laws.
The legal interests and rights of foreign media and reporters in Hong Kong will be fully guaranteed as long as they abide by the law and their reporting is done in accordance with legal rules and regulations. We support the relevant department of the Hong Kong Special Administration in their strengthening of management and servicing of media in accordance with the law.
The reality is that China's move is aimed at limiting the scrutiny of police brutality in Hong Kong. Student reporters and freelancers captured some of the most striking scenes of pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. They now face imminent arrest. Only 205 news outlets have been recognized under these amendments. The rest will soon be declared illegal. As the crackdown on media begins, dissidents are being put behind bars. 23-year-old Joshua Wong, the face of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement, has been put on trial for violating China's draconian anti-mask laws. He made this appeal to the world before getting arrested.
With the chilling effect generated by the Beijing authorities, it's the third cases that I need to face already since last June I left prison. But no matter what happened, I will still continue to resist and hope to let the world to know that how Hong Kongers choose not to surrender. Even they can prosecute us, they can arrest us, they can lock us up in prison, but they can't censor our commitment, continue to fight for freedom.
After more than a year of protests and unrest, China's grip on Hong Kong is growing more firm. The media is the latest victim. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
A diplomatic crisis is brewing between Bangladesh and Saudi Arabia. At least 25,000 Bangladeshi migrant workers who work in Saudi Arabia are not being able to fly back to Riyadh. Their visas and work permits have expired. There are no direct flights to Saudi Arabia. Ticket prices have spiked. And all of them are now staring at a loss of livelihood. When we spoke to these migrant workers, they pointed fingers at a nefarious black market and the Rohingyas. Here's a ground report from Dhaka.
Saudi Arabia is Bangladesh's largest overseas market. At least 4 million Bangladeshis work in the country. That's 31% of Bangladesh's total overseas employment. But all's not well between Riyadh and Dhaka. Thousands of Bangladeshi migrant workers are protesting in the country's capital. Why? Because they want to return to Saudi Arabia. But many of their visas and work permits have expired. There are no flights or tickets for the ones that are flying. As a result, 25,000 workers are stranded in Bangladesh.
ছুটিতে এসে সবারই যত ব্যাংক ব্যালেন্স যা ছিল সব শেষ হয়ে গেছে কারো কাছে এখন টাকা নাই। 10 অক্টোবর আমার মানে ভিসার মেয়াদ শেষ এবং কি 17 অক্টোবর আমার আকামার মেয়াদ শেষ। আমার আকামাদের মেয়াদ শেষ হলে আমি আর ঢুকতে পারবো না।
টোকেন তো দূরের কথা, আমাদের জিজ্ঞাসাও করে না যে আমরা যেতে পারবো কিনা বা আমাদের এই ছুটিগুলি বাড়বে কিনা।
Saudi Arabia has announced visa extension for migrant workers, but there has been no update on the official sites. Migrant workers also point out that the crisis is not all black and white. There is a tussle between civil aviation authorities of the two countries. Here's a quick recap. Bangladesh's flag carrier, Biman Bangladesh, wanted to fly to Riyadh. Saudi Airlines, too, wanted to operate to Bangladesh. While the latter was given a nod, Biman Bangladesh's request was blocked by the Saudi Civil Aviation. So, Dhaka revoked the permission for Saudi Airlines. The result was this. Many migrant workers who bought those flight tickets were left with no planes to board. Both the airlines have finally been allowed to resume operations from the 1st of October. That's just a week away. This rush has given birth to another problem. Flight tickets are now being sold in the black market.
কেউ কেউ ভিতর 4 দিন অবস্থান করতেছে, এখানকার টিকিটগুলো কোথায় গেল?
এখনো টোকেন পাইতাছি না, কোনো আশা ভরসা নাই, গেট বন্ধ করে আছে, জানদা গেট বন্ধ।
The problem does not end here. Riyadh claims that many Rohingyas have moved to Saudi Arabia from Bangladesh. It is now pushing for their repatriation.
I said, if those who left Bangladesh ever had a Bangladeshi passport, we will reissue it. But if they went there via another country, we have nothing to do. We have a committee working on this.
How does all of this impact Bangladesh? Remittances. The income from foreign labor has always been a large contributor to the country's economy. Last year, it was around $19 billion. 31% of Bangladesh's migrant workers are employed in Saudi Arabia. They are now staring at uncertainty and job losses. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Let's head to the United States. 40 days to go for the presidential election. The controversies are only getting bigger. Tonight, I want to talk to you about a controversy that has the potential of derailing the entire Democratic campaign. It involves Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's only surviving son, all of 50 years old, often described as the former vice president's quote-unquote fatal weakness. Hunter Biden's past and his lifestyle have been the favorite subject of American tabloids and magazines, and not without reason. He was kicked out of the U.S. Navy for cocaine abuse. He was held in contempt for fathering a child with a stripper and refusing to pay for child support. His affair with his deceased brother's wife has also been a subject of much media scrutiny. This scandal-plagued son has now landed in another controversy. A Republican-led Senate committee has released a report on Hunter Biden's alleged fraudulent business transactions. The report is titled Hunter Biden, Burisma and Corruption. It has been compiled by Senate Republicans. The report suggests that Biden Jr. used his father's position as American vice president for transactions which involved potential criminal activity. These charges are not new, frankly, but this time they've been made in an 87-page Senate report. Let me share with you the most stinging excerpts. The report says that Hunter Biden was paid as much as $50,000 per month to serve on the board of Burisma. What's that? It's a Ukrainian natural gas company with a corrupt owner. That's not all. Hunter Biden used his family name to strike deals with several foreign nationals. These are people from questionable backgrounds linked to a range of criminal activities like prostitution. The report says Biden Jr. paid women from Russia and other Eastern European countries, women who appeared to be linked to either a prostitution or a human trafficking ring. The report also talks about Hunter Biden's financial transactions with Chinese nationals, who apparently have strong connections with the Chinese Communist Party. They belong to the top brass of several state-owned and private Chinese companies like the CEFC, China Energy Corporation, and its subsidiary, the China Energy Fund Committee, to name a few. Hunter Biden is said to have dealt directly with the founder of this company, Ye Jianming, a man previously associated with the People's Liberation Army, the PLA of China. And we're not done yet. It's not just Hunter Biden that this report talks about. It raises questions on the entire Biden family's transactions. It says that Joe Biden's brother James and his wife also had business dealings with Chinese nationals linked either to the PLA or the Communist Party. These associations are said to have resulted in millions of dollars of cash flow. Now, here's the other side of the story, and we must tell you this. While this report details irregularities in Hunter Biden's business transactions and foreign links, it falls short of strong legal evidence. The last time such accusations were made against the Biden family, American lawmakers could not find much proof. If these allegations, the ones made in this report, are indeed true, the Republicans must take the battle to court once again. A headline recently called Afghanistan the worst place for a woman on earth. Years of Taliban rule made the women of Afghanistan almost invisible in public life. They were banned from going out of their homes without supervision. They were banned from education or even participating in sports. But 19 years of bloody war later, women in Afghanistan are finally exercising their rights. In the conservative city of Kandahar, a women's rights activist has opened an all-female gym. At least 50 women are going to this fitness center every day in burqa and without any fear. It's a story you must watch.
The city of Kandahar has never seen anything like this. A female-only gym. This is the first of its kind. At least 50 women come to this gym every day. They exercise their right to life, their right to be healthy, without any fear.
Undoubtedly, coming here is not without fear. And everyone knows that in a situation like this, women are more afraid. But if we look at it from another angle, exercise is really beneficial to our health, and thus it brings us happiness. This is why we focus more on our goals and ignore our fears.
For gym instructor Sana Jan, this gym also means financial independence and security.
I'm so delighted to work here because I can help women and get exercise for myself too. After all, exercise is good for my health. The money I earn from here is a great financial help to my family.
Talking women's rights in Afghanistan is like talking gun laws in the United States. This gym too has seen its share of opposition. Founder Mariam Durrani is often told that her gym violates the Sharia.
The reaction of the ladies was very positive because they needed it. But unfortunately, what bothered me was the reaction of the men, especially the men who were educated and thought they were intellectuals. These men were the ones who reacted negatively to our club and even insulted me because they thought our club was in opposition to the Sharia.
Mariam is used to such opposition. The 36-year-old has been a women's rights campaigner for a while now. Apart from this gym, Mariam runs a radio station for women. She has also served on the provincial council. It was last year that she started this facility, an all-women's gym, the first of its kind in Kandahar. Fringe threats do not scare her, but the thought of the return of the Taliban does.
Not only sports, but all sectors in which women work are an area of concern. Our concern is that if Taliban returns and reunites with the government, what will be the restrictions they will impose? Because given what I have been following on the news, I think the Taliban's mindsets and ideas have not changed very much.
When the Taliban ruled Afghanistan between 1996 and 2001, they barred women from leaving their houses. Women could only step out under male guidance. Education and sports, too, were banned for women. It has taken 19 years of bloody war for the women of this country to fight for their rights. Today, Afghan women powerlift. They also mastered jabs. Afghan women are finally chasing their dreams. They are no longer confined only to the kitchen. But all of this could take a U-turn if the Taliban returns. The terror group has already signed a deal with the United States. Washington wants to withdraw their troops from Afghanistan. And the Taliban, they want to once again rule this country. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
One of our biggest fears of artificial intelligence is that it is here to steal our jobs. Well, we have good news for you. Those fears may be unfounded. During the Wuhan virus pandemic, robots across the world have helped in the fight against the virus. They've made lives easier. They've helped people connect with their loved ones. Some robots are also taking the virus head-on. On Gravitas Tonight, we introduce you to some of these bots.
This is Gundam, a Japanese fiction robot. Till about a few months ago, Gundam was only confined to manga, films, merchandise, and plastic models. Not anymore. Gundam has come to life in Yokohama. It can walk, bend a knee, point at the sky, and do a whole host of other things. But what is Gundam's job? This life-size robot is the centerpiece of the brand's Yokohama factory. It is 18 meters tall and weighs about 25 pounds. It was supposed to be open to public on the 1st of October, but China had other plans. So Gundam fans will now have to wait for some time before they can meet their hero in real life. This giant is a showpiece, but there are robots half its size that are fighting real-life enemies, like these ones. They are fighting the Wuhan virus at one of London's biggest train stations. Their weapon of choice? Ultraviolet light.
So the robots work by moving into a room and automatically mapping out a room and then undertaking a route round the room. That's the most effective cleaning and quick and effective routes for disinfecting the either room or area that they're in.
In Egypt, this robot is lending a helping hand to Wuhan virus patients. It is also helping the medical staff by reducing their risk of infection. Halfway across the world, Mitra too is doing a fine job. It is helping Wuhan virus patients in India speak to their loved ones. Mitra in Hindi means friend. And guess who is man's best friend? Meet Scar, the dog robot. He is here to replace us humans in dangerous places. Be it dangerous terrains or mines, Scar is equipped with 5 camera modules. He can observe the environment, take measurements, and even map an area.
Le chien est le meilleur ami de l'homme, donc ma croyance à moi, c'est de dire que effectivement un robot chien.
The dog is man's best friend. So my own belief is that a robot dog, at least a 4-legged mobile one, is the best solution to make it versatile in very rough terrain.
Fonctionne, mais apporte d'autres contraintes de mobilité.
Isn't it an amusing world we live in? Fantasy and reality can so easily be fused. It took a pandemic for us to shed our fear of these robots. Not all of them are here to steal our jobs. Some of them are here just to make our lives a little easier. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Yes, in hope we live. On that note, we are wrapping up this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.